G'day, welcome to Media Tech Talk and welcome to the first episode for 2026. I'm David Richards.
And I'm Paul Luckett. What happens when one of the world's most iconic creative technology companies decides to reinvent the future of digital experience using intelligence, identity, and trust? For more than 40 years, Adobe has shaped how the world designs, builds, personalizes, and protects digital content, from transforming creative software to pioneering responsible artificial intelligence. Adobe continues to set the global benchmark for human-centered innovation.
Now, today's guest sits right at the center of that evolution. Gabbi Stubbs leads strategy and product marketing for data management, identity, privacy, and artificial intelligence across Asia Pacific. She's been a driving force in helping organizations navigate a world where creativity and intelligence must work together, and where privacy and personalization can no longer be at odds. So here's the question. What happens when AI doesn't just help content and the creators behind it, but also helps understand who it's for, why it matters, and how it should evolve? And how will Adobe's Agent Orchestrator empower creatives and marketers to deliver campaigns that are data-driven, emotionally intelligent, and continuously optimized? Let's find out. G'day, Gabbi. How are you? And welcome to the show.
Hello, David. How are Paul? How are you both? It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Hope you had a lovely Christmas break.
Yes, it was nice and relaxing, much needed at the end of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. Gabbi, we've known each other, I think, for what must be close to 15 years. So you've had an amazing career that, I've been watching from the sidelines.
Look, thanks, David. I again probably should get you to write my CV based on what I've seen you actually produce in there. So thanks, you have been one of the main cheerleaders in that. Look, I've had a pretty varied career. You just sort of said, like I've spent a significant amount of time, in that nexus of media and data and all those kind of things. I have a really deep love of obviously media itself and technology and all of the other pieces around it. So, really passionate about that. I've been at the forefront, obviously, of, some of those step changes around, that contextual beauty that was magazines right through to, transforming that into the digital age, and then really, being at that, starting point, I guess, of what really was identity and the understanding of how to use that. So across a lot of different media houses in Australia, obviously, is key to that before I pivoted back over to, really being behind a place that was an understanding of how you deliver those a bit more extensively through MarTech and AdTech solutions over at Adobe.
Yeah, and when we met, you over at MI9, as it was, what was it, 9MSN and 9.com.au and 9 Entertainment.
Back when we were considered cowboys, right, David?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the days when you could just wear shorts and t-shirts to work almost in the sales team.
Well, no, I wasn't.
No.
The sales team was.
Absolutely not. And then you moved across to, you've been at News and ABC as well.
Yeah, all of the above. So, nice variation of what was both commercial, but also for public benefit, I think, in regard to the delivery of content. So again, that wonderful passion of being able to actually, deliver news and information on a fact base, that's a really deep passion of mine, but also to be able to make sure the relevance of that and the relevance of brands within that context is something that I feel really, strongly about. So, sitting in all of those sort of variables, but I've also done, sort of industry forecasting and analysis and prediction that sat around, what was actually happening across the broader ecosystem, or what's happening to the, the ecosystem, but also, the opportunities sort of extended from that as well. So.
Yeah, and you've been right on the forefront, as you said, with all those research and insights. That's obviously given your career a super boost. I remember when, as I said, at MI9, it was just like that was your space, and you were the go-to person for all of those industry insights. That's obviously helped inform your career and where you are today too.
Yeah, very much so. I think it's great to sit in a spot that actually is a role that is, about sort of eliciting the best of your own curiosity and to be able to contextualize things for everybody else, and then hopefully get some things right in terms of what you're seeing in terms of that movement to capitalize on that opportunity, but also, be a little bit of a flag for, probably what you shouldn't do or where you shouldn't head, I think, as an industry as well. So it's an interesting space that you can sometimes brag that you got lots right, and then other times, get it disastrously wrong. But yeah, always good fun, always interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing though, because companies really rely on those insights. It's quite empowering, especially when the sales force are going out and obviously trying to point to unique sales pitches or positions in market to help them understand where the opportunities are as well. So yeah, nicely done. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's jump into the world of Adobe. How long have you been at Adobe for now?
Oh, good question. 6.5 years,
Wow.
so I transitioned from, as I said, that longer piece in what was media. I saw that, I guess, that opportunity that really looked like an understanding of what that future looked like in terms of what was sustainable with regard to marketing and the extensibility of what you could do across the broader set of customer experience. So, the solution set from creative through to content, data and journeys, etc., really made sense to me. So, 6.5 years ago, I thought, it'd be great to be able to be on the other side of it and really have an influence in terms of how you can help brands a little bit more from a different angle. So 6.5 years has been great. Product marketing for Asia Pacific, as you said, all of the sort of roles and sort of responsibilities in different categories under there from data through to AI.
Yeah. I remember, I think it was probably the first week when you're at Adobe, it was like all about DMPs back then, data management platforms, and, sharing of third-party cookies and everything. You've seen some big changes.
Um, oh, look, I think, yeah, it definitely. Obviously, I'm old enough, if you ask my kids, to be able to actually invented the internet in and of itself. So I've seen the development of that, but also, those first incarnations of actually utilizing cookies, and then to come into a space that was really, again, so transformative just around that, and working to, solutions that were a lot more embedded within the PII context and really getting close to understanding of not just who you are, but what you do, I think was a really, massive amount of change and learning just in that particular space. So I love that, that notion of change and being able to continue to evolve around that. And, we're now here in another sort of step change moment around AI. That I think gives another opportunity to be able to really transform and take and support brands to be able to take that to that next level again.
Yeah. Should we touch on the Adobe Experience Platform? Do you want to just take us through the key points of what that is, how Adobe conceptualized the platform versus what was the DMP and buying that from Demdex, and how that's different in market?
Yeah, I mean, the experience platform effectively is what you call the spine of our digital experience sort of business. So, we still, the pedigree of Adobe, as really strong and creative, but we have this digital experience side of the business, which is deeply rooted, as I sort of flagged beforehand, around content, around data and journeys, which is really the bedrocks of your marketing and customer experience. But Experience Platform was designed to be that foundational architectural layer to be able to tie all those things together. So the opportunity then means that you have everything natively integrated from that as your core base. And the three elements of that, I guess, are around the unification of the data, the activation on intelligent sort of insights outside of that, but all baked within the context of trust and privacy as well. And so we have a number of different applications that serve different componentries thereof after there. So, a real-time CDP, for example, that really drives that profile unification, but an understanding of a user, as I said before, not just who they are, but what they do. And those marketing automation sort of systems that might be journey optimizer and customer journey analytics, which is also then an understanding both offline and online in terms of all of the navigation of a user across different sort of experiences and connection points with a brand as well. So it is the core of everything that we sort of build off. And I think the core benefit of that was a massive step change from where we've been. There was one thing to be able to recognize that, the world of DMPs was fundamentally changing based on cookies coming or going, but that destiny being with somebody else, I guess.
Yeah.
But also the ability to be able to create significant more relevance and therefore, more value within a customer experience by having, the information a lot more centered and true to who we knew and what we knew about individual users. So the change was quite significant in that alone, but Adobe made the very deliberate experience to be able to, take a massive step back and create this foundational element, which meant that it had the ability to be able to then be open and extensible, but to also be able to evolve and to innovate on top of that, integrated or natively connected sort of platform in any direction, or flex the experience management or the experience orchestration sort of business need, or any business needed to from there as well. So it's core of what we do. So the old AEP, we call it. I've been through it. I think we were talking beforehand about all the acronyms that we have in Adobe, but Experience Platform is one of the ones that obviously sits in mind, but it is foundationally, core to everything we need to do. And I think once you've got that right, and I think as we start to move forward in this space of AI, the data that is actually being powered or able to be powered through that, and especially governed through that, and the quality of doing so, I think is really setting that bedrock for how you ensure that what you do and execute off the top with AI is actually going to be significantly better quality and more effective as well.
Yeah. Gabby, I want to pull you up on, you said step change with the Adobe Experience Platform, and we'll call it AEP, just keep it short. So the step change having to build their own or proprietary built solution in this experience platform versus an acquisition, which is what the DMP was from Demvex, as I mentioned. That step change is significant. And it took quite some time for Adobe to build this platform before it was released and taken to market. What do you know sort of roughly when Adobe started taking on this project? Was it somewhere around about 2009, 10? Have I got the dates right?
No, that's probably closer back to when the power of the DMP was sort of in play. The build itself was probably around about, sort of the build itself was probably around about 2015, and
Yeah, right.
came to pass in terms of actual launch around about 2019, 2018, 2019, and then the application sort of built off that. But it was, to your point, a significant time in years in actual the build of that. So foundationally, obviously, was something that needed to be done and took a significant amount of time to do it, away from, still having to, drive all of those solutions that existed, and it's still to this day remain effective. But, that deliberate choice was obviously years in the making, but turned out to be sort of a game changer in terms of then being able to do everything else significantly more efficiently and effectively, and from an innovation point of view, more seamless beyond that.
Yeah, that's where I'm going with this is setting a foundation for what Experience Platform does, because the Adobe Experience Cloud ID is and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, is your unique identifier that goes across Experience Platform. Is that right?
It's the identifier that we have had traditionally, including what it might sit across any particular Adobe solution. So the experience, or we call it an ECID, an Experience Cloud ID, can run across each of those. I think the core distinction, though, is that that's not necessarily intended for a use that is for all of execution. It could be leveraged as an ID, but we don't monetize or sell that ID, I think, is probably pretty critical to know. It's an enhancer for an understanding of different learnings, etc. But the reality of what we do and what we operate as a system is sort of an open and extensible piece to be able to ensure that a user or a brand can actually use their own identifier or their own ID to be able to bring in place and leverage that to its effectiveness. Of course, relative to where you can actually activate or utilize it elsewhere as well. But the core of what we've done has always been an identification of who we are. And obviously, the ECID was pretty critical within the context of the DMP beforehand. It still can be utilized, but it's not a primary ID that brands are using. They're obviously electing to use things like hashed email, for example, or their own reference pointers or their own IDs specifically to gain that relevance specific to their organization goals, and their actual customers and CRM setups and things.
Yeah. With the Adobe Experience Platform, the way I see it, it's kind of like a mobile phone where you have a device. The Adobe Experience Platform is the mobile device, and you've got all these applications that you bring into that to leverage the Adobe Experience Cloud ID and other solutioning, like you've got your ID database as an example where that's all generated and stored. But to build analytics, and as you're talking about orchestration solutions as applications that sit in the CDP that sit inside that Adobe Experience Platform, is that kind of holistically how it works?
Yeah, I've never actually thought about it as a mobile operating system, but it's a good one. I think, as said, effectively, if you have what you'd call the I guess a platform layer of some type, I guess you kind of can own and manage an ecosystem around it. So I guess that does operate, effectively like an operating system of a container, like a mobile device, for want of a better word. But as I said before, the intent is absolutely to make sure that foundationally we have a piece that we can ensure that is a springboard then for anything else that could be natively connected. There's significant value, obviously, and in purchasing new solutions or acquiring different products. We've obviously done that at different different points in time. But this has allowed us to obviously natively integrate those and build off those. And what it does is reduce the risk profile that sits around, customers, especially when you're dealing with that kind of identity, but also enable significantly more scale, through the provision of less latency or whatever it might be. So there's a number of different reasons why you would sort of work to that core premise on the basis. And to your point, because it sits within that ecosystem, it does enable you then to be able to connect and sort of enhance and also make sure all of those systems, integrate or work well together and very seamlessly. Outside of that, though, we do obviously then have a very open and agnostic, sort of operation system. We integrate with everything like APIs or other sort of direct customized integrations as well. So, the intent is to make sure that a user or a brand can obviously operate within any particular environment or with any particular vendor they want on any particular sort of element of their marketing. But obviously, from an Adobe point of view, we have that, expansiveness that does sit across all of digital experience in, full funnel sort of marketing, but also then that creative side as well. So I'll probably have to steal that, David.
Yeah, you're
off
welcome.
the post.
There is a license fee though.
It's a much shorter way of describing it than how I just did, certainly.
Is that something that's been kind of challenging? Because obviously the brand has a long and storied history and legacy. I mean, it's pretty rare that one of your products gets turned into a verb, right? Like we say photoshopped, we don't say, hey, that picture's edited. We say, hey, that picture's photoshopped. I mean,
Left, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was learning, Premiere Pro, Photoshop, all that kind of stuff, 20 years ago, and I didn't realize that Adobe even had a marketing or a data business until I joined News Corp 8 years ago, right? And I imagine there's people in the industry that have no idea that it's got the creative, production side of it. Is that something that's difficult to kind of keep that whole thing aligned? And I guess what would you really define Adobe as in terms of what type of business it is today? Is it a marketing company? Is it a data company?
Great question. I think you're right. Like that's actually my experience as well. If we can go to different environments and people will literally say, "We thought you did PDFs," and like they are genuinely consistent sort of experiences, and so they're pleasantly surprised to be able to see that. And obviously, the creative side of our business does still constitute the largest portion of our business, without a doubt. But the debt side is in significant growth, obviously, and I think that that play has been significantly beneficial to be able to understand that, realistically, when there is so much change and so much opportunity to be able to adapt different pieces of technology as a brand, the one constant that you have or the one sustainable sort of competitive advantage is customer experience, right? And so the ability to be able to continue to do that well. And Adobe obviously recognized, that piece when they originally bought, sort of in the days of buying Demdex and Omniture and all of those sort of capacities, they had content and analytics. So really started to think about how that creative was starting to be brought to life with digital marketing, and then sort of evolved into broader customer experience management by bringing in the journeys components and elements of that. And now you see us in the space that is really about full customer experience orchestration, from creative to content production to content supply chains, developing the distribution of the variations of all of those, right through to them being able to say, I understand who you are as a user, but I also understand I can leverage the ability to be able to maximize and optimize against the data that also looks like operational data or other constructs within there, or the content data, right? Not just the data about a user. And so that really brings all of that to life. So it's an interesting thing. So that evolution has very much been around the expansiveness, how it continue to evolve in the face of that customer experience more broadly. But again, it's still it takes a little bit of time to be able to, I think, explain that if you sit outside the CMO org, very much when you start to talk into IT spaces, they're very, very familiar with us as a PDF system as opposed to a full, integrated tech system like it actually exists. So I guess that's the job of a good product marketer, but given it's not well known, maybe I'm not necessarily being very successful if I join.
No, you're doing a good job. But I think, Gabby, the thing is with Adobe that you've got clouds, and just sort of leaning into what Paul was asking about, that, you've got your Creative Cloud, which is where Photoshop, Premiere, and Illustrator, and, all of those creative production tools sit. And then you've got the Experience Cloud, which is where more of the marketing and ad tech products sit, which is what we're talking about with the DMPs and CDPs and experience platforms, etc. How many clouds are there, and what are their titles? I think about 2 of them.
Well, we do it. We traditionally, I think if it's safest to put them in Creative Cloud and Experience Cloud, we had multiples at one point, and we kind of moved away from that. I think as specifically as clouds, and talk about very holistically customer experience orchestration. I
Yeah.
think so. And under that, I mean, we have dozens and dozens of different solutions in every single capacity, as I said, but we try not to necessarily put it under that. I think the distribution of that and what SaaS looks like even more broadly is changing so dramatically.
Yeah.
It kind of limits it when everything relies on the interconnectedness of the other one to be significantly more effective. So, yeah, if you were to look at it straight like that, we obviously had a document cloud, we had a creative cloud, we had an experience cloud moving forward. And it's probably just easier to look at us as one big customer experience orchestration platform.
It's amazing, isn't it? Just the scale. And I know Adobe's made some great acquisitions over its period, the time that it's been around for. Like Macromedia is an example, when that acquired that business and got Flash and Dreamweaver, and I think it was Fireworks as well, just for, enhancing its product lineup. We're talking to Georgia Blemmer from Innovid a while back, and last year actually. Yeah, I'm talking about Flash Talking. I didn't realize that Flash Talker was actually branded after the Flash product for its animation capabilities. So yeah, how's that? It's the name still sits around, even though the product's still not.
It does, yeah, for sure. There's a few of those different ones. It's still hard for people to get their head around some of the, as the DMP, for example, Audience Manager, for example. People like to think of that as a reincarnate as our CDP as well. So people get very attached to the brands, especially when they're particularly effective. But to Paul's earlier point, sometimes they actually become verbs or become part of not mainstream vernacular, and it's hard to disassociate that when somebody's actually being the lead innovator around that.
Yeah.
And poor Flash. Flash doesn't have a verb in it. It deserves one.
He's actually a superhero, right? Like, I like to think
That's a good
stuff
point.
like that.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about it like
Flash
that.
got of, yeah, like, and to your point, it's a lot more of an adjective than it is actually anything else. I think these days, or a verb.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, that's great. So with AI, because all of that data that Adobe has access to, with all the publishers and marketers, they're using Adobe Experience Platform to collect, process, profile, and then distribute that data. That's quite a powerful platform when you bring in the DMP, obviously from a cookie, I can never say that, cookie perspective. But now you've got hashed email IDs that are now expanding the capabilities of what Adobe can do in a data safe environment. And privacy safe environment. The AI component must be amazing and like almost a bottomless bucket of opportunity. Is that what you're seeing too?
Yeah, look, it is. And I think what's really interesting probably around our position, I use hash email as an example, but there are other variants of that. But the more important point is probably the variety of the data as well. So one, the quality of the data, the efforts that actually look like data minimization as almost an oxymoron to that, and then the data governance. So it means that then you're set up for better success than AI. So if I start back at the other side, look, we don't encourage a client ever bringing in reams and reams of data to be more effective. In fact, the opposite is true, but the opposite is also true for the purposes of making sure that you can hold stricter compliance towards things like privacy and better governance of that data as well. But it's about the relevancy of the data itself. And so that really means that when you focus on a premise that looks like data minimization, you're effectively working to a notion of only bringing in the data that is effective and relevant to that, but also the information that is fully consented for a particular use. So, what the outcome of that is clearly then that you being able to leverage a set of data that has a series of different permissions on it, but an understanding that there's a value exchange potentially that might be wrapped up within that. So the provision of data to be able to make an experience more relevant to me or personal to me, I think is a great way to be able to think of that. So that notion of data minimization actually enables a lot of different things. And so the other point is then around the actual variety of data. As I said beforehand, it's not just about who I am, so my IDs specifically, but it's about the additional signals of what I do, whether that's online and offline, and being able to tie those things together to be able to start creating semantic layer of who I am as a person. And then the additional things that you might know about me from an operational point of view or a commercial point of view, etc., to be able to understand, things like intent or what I might do, or be able to predict that. And then you can see when I have that base that is really relevant, and it is more effective data, it's good quality data, but it also has these variables just about not who but what and whatever. It gives that opportunity to be able to add the layer of AI to be more effective, and the outcomes from that be significantly greater. I mean, AI is very much like when you're using your data, it becomes a dumpster fire, and that can be, you could be, burning for good or burning for bad in here. So I think at the end of the day, the premise of what we do from data is probably slightly different to how everyone else does. And I would pride myself as well, I think, on being attached to an organization that actually is one of the leaders in sort of enterprise grade data governance as well. So, not just the collection of that, but the use of that, I think is really important to be able to understand. And that is really how you get to a space of being able to make sure that the data is effective, but the data is also something that embeds trust in the utilization of it. And that continues to be able to be mutual beneficial to a customer and their brand ongoing, and delivers that loyalty and that trust that continues to be able to deliver to great digital experiences, obviously. And that, as I said, is very sort of self-enforcing in the end.
Luckett, you and I have talked about doing a whole episode on AI. Do we go down to the agentic layer on what Adobe's doing in this space? What do you reckon, mate?
Yeah,
Should we do it?
absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, look, I love this. As I said, I could talk about data forever. I
Yeah.
do really think it's obviously incredibly foundational
Gabbi,
for
here we go.
everything that we do. And so this is a natural sort of, step from that. For me, this space is, as I said before, and I wasn't kidding when I actually said that I was there when the advent of the actual internet was built. So,
Yeah.
like, I have the great benefit of having seen an analog world and then this massive change into digital and being part of that. But this is a step change again, that we're about to see, that is vastly different, and a lot of people won't see in their entire careers again. So AI presents this a different opportunity, and it is effectively, when we talk very specifically, we've had AI around for ages, right? Everything that we do, because of the scale that we do, obviously has machine learning and AI already built into that, in some form or other, but it's very silent, and it's only become obviously more sexy recently because it's a lot more tangible, a lot more visible in terms of, and a lot more available, I think, in terms of its mass appeal. So it's come to the forefront really quite rapidly because of that. But when we start talking about the elements that sit around agentic, this is the space that really changes what we do in the go to marketing experience. So our agents are effectively a real culmination of all of those AI capabilities. And then when we talk about agents, and specifically intelligent agents here, what we start to get to is this space where, they have this capacity to be able to interpret your goals, to be able to create your plans, to be able to take any necessary actions across all of your different applications. And it could do so by working independently or alongside people, whatever you choose. But the intent here is for them to be able to understand the intent of a user based on that really great quality data, to be able to, work within, reasoning functions, make those decisions and take those actions deliberately towards specific goals of a business, and then, of course, learn over time. So I love this, but one of the things that I think both frightens and excites me is the idea that people don't understand I guess the spectrum of agentic. We get very lost in the idea that AI is here and it's this big thing. Hopefully I don't get sacked for saying this, but I don't think AI shouldn't be considered a feature of anything that we do. It's something to be able to solve problems. So if you don't have a problem to solve, then why are you using AI? If you don't have a good quality base around your data, then it's not going to be effective as what it is. So you can present it as a toy. I mean, we had the year of the mobile, social media, and all those great things. But effectively, if you're not solving a problem, it's pointless even going down the path. But the beauty of agentic, so we have a lot of people who will be in the market obviously talking about agentic, but there really is a spectrum of agentic that I think we need to start to understand, I think, a little bit more broadly. And so when Adobe thinks of AI, and certainly agentic, we kind of like to operate within two scenarios. And one is the relevance, and specific the focus, with regard to CXO. And the other is around the spectrum of both the low and the high end, I guess, of agentic. And so when we think about the low end of agentic, we start to think about things that are like, functionality that's like single step sort of responses, or, it really is directive or directed activity at the back end. And it's very much grounded in generic public data. As I said, where we've seen most of that momentum, to date, has been in that sort of space. I think where, brands and also vendors, of course, will, start to see significant more success is actually the space that I feel firmly that we're developing in, which is that higher end order. And so those more effective agents are going to be able to operate with things like multi-step reasoning, but also, autonomous activity to a certain degree. But they're also very much grounded in that proprietary and contextually relevant data. This is where you're going to get your most effective outcomes from. So I think it's again, so if I'm counseling a brand within this space, think about the problem you're solving and think about the relevancy of the AI you're actually integrating within there, to be able to get the outcomes, against those particular KPIs, as opposed to just choosing AI for the sake of it or choosing really generic AI.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I would 100% agree with that. And Ari Paparo, when we interviewed him last year on the podcast, I remember I asked him a question about AI fatigue in the investment community, and his feedback on that was that he thinks that basically exactly what you just said, that AI needs to be solving a problem. It can't just be like shoved in or just like, touted as a feature of something. Like, it has to be actually solving a problem. And I think I've been saying to people recently, I am pretty positive around AI, and obviously I'm a consultant, so like I have to work with clients on that. But I tell people that technology alone doesn't always drive the way society goes, right? It's really the practical application of those technologies and whether that gets accepted by the mainstream or not. And to your point, AI has been around for decades at this point in various forms, and it's only really been, the advent of ChatGPT on the last couple of years that's really brought it to the mainstream and was that real like practical application that really took the mainstream by storm. And there's other technological advancements over the last 10 years that have happened that haven't done that yet. I mean, blockchain, for example, right? Like a big new technology that really still hasn't hit that mainstream outside of Bitcoin. And I think, your earlier point as well around data orchestration, it's interesting watching the industry kind of change around AI and how the different directions we're moving, and we're figuring out how to use it properly and how to integrate it properly in businesses. And one of the things, as you point out, is that if you have crap data, or if your data isn't governed properly, then there's limited applications for that AI that you're able to use, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's interesting, to your point around what's successful and what's not, it said it has to be able to solve a problem. But one of the reasons that, my observation is that Adobe has been more successful is that it sits in service of. And so it's not a reductive technology. None of our solutions are reductive. It's additive to everything. Our mission is literally empowering everyone to be able to create. And so putting the tools and the capabilities and platforms in the hands of brands to be able to do so, and I guess do no harm in doing it, is really quite, I think, meaningful for me on a personal level. But what's really interesting about it is that it is actually something that enables everyone else to be better, or be able to deliver, those experiences themselves. And so I think some of those elements around, you use blockchain as an example, are very much, they serve a specific market, but they're not necessarily in service of, or something that is additive to an ecosystem necessarily. And so they will always struggle a little bit. Again, which is why that, customer experience still sits at the heart of what most brands need to be able to do. And AI is literally that piece that's going to be able to really put that on steroids, I think, moving forward. So look, I love this space. And as David says, Adobe, we've got more agents probably than the CIA at the moment, I think, in terms of how many we're delivering out. But I think what you'll see in time is actually, this idea that those agents aren't actually necessarily the brands that we run with. They might not be the flashes of the next few years, but we have, an audience agent, for example. But more importantly, we have an agent orchestrator that sits around that. And the intent of that is to be able to really be that, that decisioning layer, to be able to really solve those complex problems, but solve them across all of that customer experience sort of scenario, whether that's from your planning right through to your audience experience creation, your journey management, your content development and variation and distribution, the full circle right through to the execution or activation of those into measurement, right? So the idea is to be able to, bring that together, or get that agent to be able to have all of those, agent orchestrator to be able to have all those agents to talk in unison relative to the job to be done or the problem to be solved in that, and draw on that and execute that through the relevant solution. So it's really quite unique in that scenario. And again, I'm not confident that the agents will have a brand identity moving forward necessarily, but the jobs to be done and the problems that we're solving are going to be the pieces that sit, I think, more effectively. And I think that idea of being able to really not just create more effective experiences through AI, but also make the teams more effective in creating those experiences. Like, so those pieces around enhancing creativity and personalization, but also productivity, I think are the key components that I think are going to be core differentiators in what we do in AI.
Gabby, I'm going to ask you quickly. I saw Carla Cook, who's at Adobe on the DSP advertising side, probably about 7 years ago, present at an Adobe summit this solution, and it was, did you call it cheats? Is that where they just do like this sort of future-looking opportunity? Sorry? Sneaks, beg your pardon. So I saw her do like a future-looking solution capability that Adobe was sort of teasing the market with, and it was literally using the DSP and all the data that was collecting through the DMPs at the time, and basically putting a brief into the system, and it was looking at the insertion order IO lines in the campaign, and it would then basically process that, find the audience, and then using its ability to understand the creative through data asset management platform to bring the creative assets in, do dynamic creative optimization solution, and it basically did all of this within a couple of seconds and delivered the campaign for in the DSP ready to deliver, and then it would do the optimization based on the engagement that it saw from the audience in its insights that it's collected. I feel that this agentic space is almost at the point where it's bringing all of that together in reality. Is that kind of what we're seeing, where it brings in the data? You've got your DSP, you've got your creative solutions from not just the advertisers but also from the publishers as well.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of what we do, obviously, across all CXOs beforehand, has the data that not only sits about you, but data that could be brought in based on performance or different needs around media or whatever it could be. But the content that might sit within you, different dams or leveraged by your CMS, whatever it might be, everything is a component of that customer experience and marketing. And so you're literally working through a conversational interface in this scenario to be able to work through a multi-step phase of a full marketing campaign setup or a full customer experience setup or launch or product or whatever, and instructing that, and it will give you back the variance around how you build your audience, who the audience was, how you optimize that audience to be able to deliver to specific goals as opposed to just a particular target, what the variables might look like if you were to change those on seasonality in a campaign kind of scenario, and what you need to account for there, right through then to the most relevant content for that or variations of that content and optimizing those in real time. So I think you're right, as I said beforehand, because we have the breadth of the different types of data that sit around the user and what they do, but also around the actual content as well that needs to be delivered, and then all of the other operational things. It gives you that ability to be able to make sure that you can extend yourself right beyond the capacity of just being able to deliver a campaign. You have everything, the multi-step planning, but also the optimization in real time and the end-to-end of full marketing funnel as it needs to, right? So look, I've seen obviously all of the demos. Some of our agents are live within our system at the moment, and when we talk to clients or show clients these, even in their early infancy, it blows your mind at what it can do. That in a matter of just a few minutes compared to what would have taken weeks and months beforehand. And I'm talking that's just in the planning, let alone the actual execution of those. So this is a game changer in terms of being able to get your end-to-end flow from marketing and customer experience really lined up, but also being able to be optimized in real time
Yep.
across every single touch point, wherever it might want to actually execute. So yeah, it's super exciting. It's something you could never have imagined probably 10 years ago. I think we often
No.
sort of overestimate what happens
So great.
in the next 2 years of tech, but
Yeah.
underestimate it 10 years. And certainly that amount of change
Yeah.
has sort of accelerated definitely in the last 2 years. But I think that's some things that people probably couldn't have envisaged 10 years ago.
Yeah, I love, I think Adobe's uniquely positioned in market, not just because of what we've just been talking about, but its ability now to bring all of this together. And we've touched on this, but it almost feels like in the agentic world where we have AI talking to AI, that it could literally build a performance-based campaign all by itself, given the basic insights from the campaign brief, and almost not require people to be part of that discussion to go down this path. And that, I don't think, I'm not trying to spook people, but I think, as you've said, it's taken weeks, months out of the campaign setup. And look, when you and I were working in digital media many years ago, it would take 4 weeks from the agency briefing us via email. We would then have to receive a signed fax, and then it would take, the whole process of getting the campaign set up. And Luckett, you've been part of this as well, where we can now do this literally in literally minutes when we talk programmatic. And I feel that's the natural progression of where we're going to, where, specifically with the programmatic space, and DSPs are going to have this agentic feel where people aren't necessarily needed as much as what they are at the moment, but we still need to keep humans in the loop.
Yeah, look, I mean, the same sort of conversations happened, I guess, when programmatic, initially sort of came to the fore, right? There was concern around where it would replace and what it would replace, and I think you're right to caution, right? Like there's a contrarian in me that feels like there's been parts of my career where I've been really quite outspoken around the potential harms of different things. But I feel a little bit like Paul, for the most part, really optimistic about the potential around everything like that. AI is going to be no different, and it doesn't matter whether it's in ad tech or any other capacity. It absolutely has the ability to be able to be a replacement for elements, right? But not in the way that we think, and it also shouldn't be considered as something that's a replacement. It should be something that is, considered around the expansion of the human roles. It should be something that actually enables us to be able to reshape work and to continue to evolve, what we do as active humans. The best of what we have is independent and I guess independent thought and curiosity, and therefore creativity. And if we're true to the Adobe sort of, mission around creating or empowering everyone to be able to create, if you take away that, your cognitive, sort of powers, I guess, and replace it just with a machine, and this is as an individual or as an organization, you're handing over everything from the decisioning, the licensing and the risk around the brand, etc., to an actual machine. But it's not it's not something that's actually currently capable of being able to replace ingenuity, I guess. And so creative thought in and of itself is something that hasn't been created beforehand effectively. And AI is currently running off the premise effectively of existing information. And so there's always going to be a capacity for people to be able to be significantly more creative, and that distinction is greater than what can be produced there. And so I think about not offloading or not outsourcing your cognition elsewhere, but also not outsourcing your creativity and all of your innovation to a machine that necessarily can't come up with the same level of ingenuity that you are. So the independence of thought in here and your ability to be able to adapt to that, I think, is key. But I do think that there is sort of changed roles. One of the great things about AI is clearly that some of those functions that are time consuming, that took weeks and months to be able to plan, is actually able to be done by a machine at significant greater. That's mundane stuff. That's not what humans should be designed to actually do. Like, we are much better when you have a human in the loop that can deal with the things that are deeply human, like real connection points, or whether it is that creativity or that ingenuity. And I think that's important to be able. We do have that really quite uniquely compared to everyone else. So if we start to outsource everything, then we end up in a space where we don't get to control, the outcomes in a way that are actually,
Yeah.
deeply, deeply human, I guess.
I think
Yeah.
I think it's giving everybody the more informed ability to make decisions on a broader range of topics for the better opportunities that lay ahead in campaign management. Luckett, have you seen a change? Yeah.
Sorry, what was
So yeah,
that?
look, it's
I was just saying, Paul, have you seen a change from what you're doing in the consulting side?
Well, I just had a thought as Gabby was talking just now, like the description that just came into my head, kind of to describe how AI is being used right now is really time compression, right? It's time compression of tasks, and throughout all of history, you've seen new technologies who their primary kind of output of it is time compression, and these things are almost always additive, and for me, it's allowed me to, being in the consulting space, talking to clients about AI transformation. I mean, I went to a startup event not long ago, and I was shocked at how many startups exist out there in the SMB and B2B space that are building tools that then they're AI enabled, but they're just digital transformation for like veterinary clinics, for example. So there's so many business sectors out there that are still doing digital transformation, and so like that AI transformation for the SMB space, I think is absolutely enormous, and it's allowed me to, it's been a force multiplier for me as a consultant in terms of my output and what I'm able to deliver.
Yeah, agree. So that to your point, I think people would be genuinely surprised about their portion of the business that hasn't actually done the first phase of digital transformation. And so, those systems, etc., that you can do as an automated function that takes away from, in the pet care industry, for example, actually taking care of pets or whatever it might be, is a significant step change to be able to let them do the job and the function that they're there to be able to do. So I think there's still significant growth that sits in that. So I think they're the things to focus on first. That doesn't mean it's not a risk, right, in terms of where it could. It really, I think one of the other great things around what, Adobe sort of does is we very much lean into, the whole ethics of it and responsible AI. As I sort of said beforehand, the intent here is to be able to make sure that it doesn't harm. We always have a human in the loop in terms of everything. And so the intent is to make sure, and I think even if you think about the customer experiences that you have, sometimes it's perfectly okay to have that as a digital interaction. But when you start to get to a point where something might go fundamentally wrong, or indeed you're having a troubling time of something, let's say, heaven forbid, there was a scenario where you had to resign an account of something because of, there was a problem, somebody was in a medical state or whatever it might be, or there'd been an accident and you had to manage finances or whatever with somebody else. Like, they're the times that you want to have a human to be able to deal with, like they're sensitive conversations. And so you have to be able to not just go, I can replace this with a human. You have to know the deeply relevant points, or where you would use the technology and where it's more relevant to actually bring a human into that. And that goes true with all of the functions across the organization as well. Some things are absolutely better managed with a human very directly. So I do think that a lot of what we do has a lot more concern that sits around, the responsible use of, certainly AI, but also the ethics that sit around it, which is the reason, again, why we're so focused on things like privacy and governance as well.
Gabby, Adobe's big, obviously. What are some of the things that you're seeing come around this year in 2026 that that you can talk about that are on the roadmap?
Yeah, no, I feel like it's it's a blessing and a curse to be with a set of products and an organization that has so much going on. You have to be able to be significantly more adaptive and more curious, and your learning capacity certainly grows. One of the two really great things, obviously, I've said to you, everything that we do is around, helping others to be able to create and build. And what's really interesting around that space is obviously how it then creates the opportunity. So we have our own agents, obviously, that sit in there, an agent orchestrator, but you'll also see this step change that starts us to think about how we help brands build their own agentic capabilities or their own agents. So a customized sort of version of how you might be able to make your own brand or different, products within your own ecosystem or discoverable or visible to a user through an agent. So we have a product, recently released called Brand Concierge, which enables that. So it really starts to bring brands into the space where they can easily access and develop their own agentic sort of capacities within their own org to be able to enhance their brand visibility.
That's cool.
And that probably is then the second point of that is I think you'll see significantly more growth in the next sort of 12 months around what is effectively brand visibility in a world that is a combination of both human web and agentic web, right? So how do you actually cope and understand with what it looks like to be able to have a brand in an ecosystem that you might have a direct human engaging with you, but also potentially an agent drawing that information from and representing you without you necessarily being able to control it. So, one of the great solutions, again, just released is what we call our LLM optimizer. And so that ability to be able to make sure that you're referencing and surfacing your brand in the most visible and discoverable way, whether or not it is being sought from a human or from agentic. So they're two of the really exciting ones. And as you know, we also just recently acquired SEMrush as well. So that piece that really starts to think around, discoverability in this new age, I think. And so you're really then thinking, if you think about the full suite again, that full customer experience orchestration across the entire marketing funnel, but also now going, okay, what does it mean to be able to be more impactful as a brand within the context of that as well? I think that's kind of the space that what I think is doing it, but again, all with the lens of being able to make sure brands are more successful in it. So it's pretty exciting. I wouldn't want to be a product manager right now. The amount of priorities I think is in the thousands trying to, get your spot in terms of getting it out of the door, but you're absolutely lean wholly into that particular thing. The only other thing that I would say that's probably a place that I think you'll see a lot more people and even Adobe lean into, and Paul sort of reached out on this beforehand. The technology itself, everyone can build tech, and at some point it doesn't necessarily become a competitive advantage unless it's solving for those problems. But it doesn't matter where we go across, the APAC market or even globally. A client never fails because of the tech. Invariably it's because the people, and we sort of spoke about this beforehand. And so I think you'll see a lot more around capacity building, in terms of the development of tools to help people navigate through and be able to work within the context of AI moving forward. So a lot more around, not just the tools, but the actual enablement, I guess, of teams using those AI tools to be able to be more successful. Because I think one thing that we've learned is as I said, you're not successful alone with the technology. You need to bring the people along with that, and so that's going to be a key component around where a lot of focus sits for a lot of organizations, including Adobe.
I love it. One prediction for 2026. We've talked about agentic. Yeah, what's your thoughts? Anything outside of
I
agentic?
have loads.
Yeah.
If I think what will, there'll probably be a little in actual tech context.
Yep.
Could you get that for me, Paul?
Oh, is that yours, Paul? That's the first time.
That's so funny. Look, I think I think we'll see significant possibility, but also threat come to the fore. So this is going to be a really pivotal year to be able to determine whether brands will be able to have their own agency and control of what they do in an AI context. I think there is significant potential, like we've seen beforehand in social media, for example, for different brands to be able to potentially, lose a little bit of that agency and control, certainly in the relationship direct to their own customers, because of the power that was sort of developed and born out and should have been seen, I think, probably around social media and AI. And AI platforms also have that potential to do it. I think this will be a breakout year around people landing that. So it's not a prediction. It's actually my hope that we kind of get that right in understanding, our own agency as individuals and our own data, but also our own agency as a brand and how we're able to control that, to be able to ensure that we can control our own sort of product and organization, but our destiny as well. I think in terms of actual technical predictions, I think we'll see some additional movement around places like multimodal. So, text is one thing, text image is another thing that obviously has started, but, the integrations of audio and video into those sort of environments is one. More contextual AI, those sort of things, I think, create significant step change and advantage for any organization to be able to manage with. Those things I think will start to come back into the fore. I do think this piece, and I sort of alluded to in our direction, is obviously it's human and agentic web. I think that there will be a massive shift in terms of that discoverability, like, the agentic, the AEO, not CEO, SEO anymore, starts to become really sort of, significant in terms of that growth space. And I also do think, exactly as you touched on beforehand, David, there will be a massive breakout in terms of AI for ad tech very specifically that really starts to nail that it's never done beforehand. So I think that's my prediction for. But I've got lots. I'll probably go forever.
Yeah.
Actually, the only other one I will say is probably around data governance. This is the one that I think we have to nail. So, and the distinction between data governance, governance on data itself is generally around inputs, but we'll see this mentality shift around governance in AI, which is significantly more about outputs. And so the way that we think about that, I think, needs to change. So I think there'll be a breakout in terms of roles, etc., that sit within the context of data governance and AI governance that we probably haven't seen beforehand. And there's that opportunity around the human involvement and evolution of the space as well. So they're online.
We're gonna have to bring you back in, because I want to. This for me personally is about we've done the foundation for the last few years and getting TV into digital, and obviously getting it to where it's at now. But you just briefly touched on around dynamic creative solutioning in TVCs, in the TVC space, being able to have an image or just a piece of footage, if you like, and using AI to bring that to life in a more, like a longer form piece of content that can then be repurposed using AI without having to go out and film it, and using crews and things. Not to replace people, obviously, really want to make a point of that, but enhancing their capability and what they can do. But because I know Adobe's got some really interesting things in what they're doing in that space as well. But yeah, we'd love to get you in and have a chat about that. Would you be open for that discussion?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Obviously, I've got a lovely counterpart as well who's fantastic on the content space, who really sings this one. But yeah, it's super exciting. Anything that you can imagine, I think is now a possibility. So it is absolutely endless. I would love to be able to stretch that conversation around the full suite.
So magic. Gabbi, I'm going to have a try at your title. APAC Strategy and Product Marketing, Data Management, Identity, Privacy, and AI. Have I got it right?
Okay, I'd probably extrapolated that a little bit, and if we were true to Adobe form, we'd make that into an acronym, and we'd probably have every sort of letter in the alphabet that falls into it. So, I like to think that I represent our products in the market and our market into our products team, and that's centered around sort of data and AI, more holistically. So again, it's yeah, call me whatever you want, David. It's not late for dinner.
Definitely not. We will do lunch though.
You definitely.
Good. Gabbi, thanks for joining us on the show. We look forward to having you back on for another conversation to keep us up to date on what's happening over in the Adobe space.
Thanks, David. Love it. Thank you. Love what you guys are doing as well. Thanks for sharing all the ideas with the ecosystem more broadly. So I look forward to the next one.
Thank you. Look forward to it. And thanks to everyone watching and listening to the show today. We look forward to seeing you next time here on Media Tech Talk.
I'm Nicholas Schuler, CEO and co-founder of Adobe. Digital media, the chaos isn't the ads. It's in tracking the revenue behind every impression on every site in real time. So how do you bring clarity to that kind of complexity? Join me in the conversation that's inspiring media minds. That's next on Media Tech Talk.